Hello and welcome to another episode of the Travelling Through podcast. I am Emma, your podcast host, and each week I'm out and about chatting to Londoners and those who love, live and work in this big and glorious city. In this episode, my podcast guest is Jennifer Wallace. Jennifer and I have known each other forever, it seems. And although our lives have led us in completely different directions, we are now both in London. So it was a perfect opportunity to catch up, walk and talk about London, her travels to Greece and India, her love of the Romantic poets and Hellenism, and her books, Digging the Dirt, her novel Digging Up Milton, set in the Barbican's Cripplegate Church, and which some of you may remember she Q&A'd at the bookshop in 2016, I think. And of course, we talk about her latest non-fiction book, Tragedy Since 9/11. This was a very uplifting and thought-provoking conversation, and I hope you find it so too. Enjoy. Hello, good morning. Today we are on Hampstead Heath. This is the Travelling Through podcast, and I'm with Jennifer Wallace, who I've known since I was about 9 years old, I think. Is that right, Jennifer?
Something like that,
Yeah.
6, 7,
Yes.
8.
And our
9.
fathers went to school together in Edinburgh, but you were born in London. And then you came, your family came back up to Edinburgh.
When I was about 12, 13.
Was it? Oh yeah, and that's when
We saw each other more regularly.
We did.
At the badminton court.
That's right. And
Highly
ice skating.
competitive games.
It was very competitive. And ice skating as well.
Yes. Charades and card games.
That's true. At New Year,
Yes.
we used to come round to you at New Year sometimes. Maybe we should stick to the path, as I haven't got my walking boots on here. But we're going to take an amble around Hampstead Heath, which is... I was just having a quick look to see what facts I could glean about what Hampstead Heath means to people. And it's 4 miles north of London, or just under 4 miles, I think. North of Westminster, really.
Yes, and in fact it's celebrating its 150th year of being in common ownership.
Is it?
This year.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, so the Hampstead Heath Act, which ensured that this would be for the use of the local people.
Yes.
And it's not a park, therefore it's a heath.
It's a heath, yes.
Means a different set of rules and regulations.
Okay, because there's also forest and meadow and ponds.
Yes.
Including swimming ponds. Which...
Yes, so we're just actually passing here the first of the swimming ponds, although the last to be created into a pond.
I think we might
swimming.
just wait for heath rangers to go by. Okay.
Yeah, so this is the mixed swimming pond for all genders.
It's actually quite open to the elements and for people to watch the swimmers here, isn't it?
Yes, you can see it from this causeway.
Yeah. And yet the other two ponds, the
More
men's-
secluded.
Yes.
Yes. Well, they were created first in the Victorian period, and they're segregated,
Okay.
male only and female only.
I think you've tried to persuade me to go swimming in the ladies' pond a couple of times, but I think it's always been too cold, and I'm too much of a wimp.
Right.
I should really try it.
Yes, you should, because it's actually really lovely when you get in.
Do you swim in the winter? as well?
No, I'm a kind of spring, summer, and early autumn swimmer, but not a winter swimmer. So May to end of September is my season.
Okay.
So I don't really go when it gets lower than 12 degrees.
Okay, but that's still pretty chilly, isn't it?
It's quite, yes.
bracing.
Yes.
And when it is that cold, how long can you stay in?
About 10 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Because
Fast
actually, yes, it's usually that cold at the start of the season.
Okay.
Because it takes longer to warm up. So
Yeah.
May, it's 12 degrees, and at that point when you go in, you haven't been swimming for 6 months, so you have to let your body adjust
Yes.
to it slowly.
Yes. And get your
And
muscles
I actually
fit.
have a short wetsuit, which the really serious swimmers don't have. I feel slightly defeatist about it, but yeah, it covers my core, not my legs
Okay.
and my arms.
I think
but-
I would have right the way down to my wrists and over my feet if possible.
Right. Well, it's a difficult. People say sometimes you get colder standing around taking your wetsuit off slowly than if you just plunge in and then have a
Quick swim.
a quick swim and then dry quickly afterwards.
Yes.
So it's difficult.
I just
debate.
had a quick look on the website, and there's this fantastic lovely old film of the ladies in the ladies' pond diving into the pond and showing the temperature under 14 degrees centigrade, and they're all in the old Victorian style swimming costumes. They're like shorts, aren't they?
Right. Yes. Little short
and like vest tops. Yes, and they all wear swimming hats. Is that compulsory?
No, it's not. I mean, now the really serious, through the winter swimmers sometimes wear hats, and they definitely wear gloves and booties, even though they don't wear wetsuits.
Right.
So they keep the extremities warm.
Okay.
Whereas I do the opposite philosophy of keeping the core warm with my wetsuit.
Yeah. Yes.
And the ladies' pond has a sunbathing meadow, which has a whole kind of social scene of its own.
Okay.
Which is women only.
Okay.
And it's really nice to go with a book in the summer, and sometimes people take picnics. And
yes, and it's very much for the locals, although it's become more and more popular to.
It's getting
those all over London.
Yes, and just in the last couple of years, partly because of the increased popularity and partly because of COVID,
yes,
they've started a booking system.
Okay.
Restricting numbers,
right?
Which those of us who knew it before kind of objected to, but I can understand the point because of the increased numbers.
Yes.
They've also doubled the price, which is much more controversial.
So how much does it cost to go swimming in the ponds?
So it's just over £4 for a swim.
For as long as you like?
No, for an hour's slot now with this booking system.
Oh, I see. Okay, so
you can stay as long as you like on the sunbathing meadow, but there's only an hour's slot for swimming.
Okay.
You can actually book several slots, so you could pop in and out,
but you'd have to pay £4 each time.
Yes, or if you buy a season ticket, which is what I did this year.
Yeah.
Previously the charge was voluntary rather than compulsory.
Yes.
And it was £2, so it's literally doubled in price.
Doubled, yes.
And there's actually a court case at the moment about this.
Is it?
Yes, that this is infringement on human rights to swim.
Okay.
Access to open water, and also contrary to the rules of the 1871 Hampstead Heath Act, which made the whole place, available to the people. So it's being
contested,
litigated at the moment.
Yes. And because I suppose it is wild swimming in a way, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes, it's not sanitised in any way, but they have lifeguards there. So the City of London is supporting a lifeguard system, and now they're supporting people checking that you've actually paid staffing as well.
Oh, really? Okay. To stop people coming through the bushes. And
exactly.
Can you actually? I suppose there are ways.
You probably could, but it's hard.
Yes. So Jennifer, although you were born in London and then spent quite a lot of your time in Edinburgh, and now you're back in London, do you consider yourself a Londoner?
I guess I do. I mean, as much as I belong anywhere, yes. Yeah, I was born in the centre of London,
yes,
Notting Hill Gate, and lived there until I was 3, and then we moved to Wimbledon. And in fact, when we lived in this flat right in the centre of Notting Hill Gate, we had something like 5 bus routes going past our door.
Oh, did you?
So, I grew up with London fumes, I guess. There's a family story, actually, that we went to visit my aunt and uncle, who were living in a very rural village in Crete at that time, where they had no cars and people went around on donkeys.
Right.
And there was just one bus a week passing the village.
My goodness.
And apparently I was very unhappy most of the time, having to do lots of walking and occasionally
Yes.
get a ride on a donkey. And the one time that I would look happy and I'd jump up and down is when I would see the one bus going past. And I'd say traffic jam at that point. So presumably I felt at home at that point. So yes, I guess London's in my blood.
In your blood, a definite London girl. You can take the girl out of London.
Yes.
But you can't take the London or the London bus out of the girl.
Yes, I guess that's. I think London has so much. There's so much history and different cultures, and there's a sense of excitement and but grittiness as well.
So having been brought up partially on the south, in the south of London. You're very much a North London.
No, I'm a North Londoner, I think,
Yes.
north of the river, politically.
Politically North London as well, yeah.
Yes, and it's closer to Cambridge where I have to commute to,
Of
so
course,
I have to be this
makes
side.
sense to, unless you want a really long commute. You go
Yes.
from King's Cross
I do, yeah.
by the train. It's a very quick commute, actually.
yes.
In fact, it's a nice day trip, isn't it, to go up to Cambridge
Absolutely.
from London for those
Yes,
visiting.
less than an hour on the train.
Okay, so here we're coming into an open bit of grassy land.
So I don't know if
here.
you want to go up to Parliament Hill or kind of the most direct way to Kenwood.
I'd love to go up Parliament Hill. I haven't
Okay.
been up because you get a fantastic view from the
You do.
top there.
I love going up any hills or mountains. It's my favourite activity. I actually find my mood lifting just being on the summit of anything.
Because, I mean, growing up in Scotland for sort of your formative years, shall we say, did you do much walking in Scotland?
Yes. We were a part of a little walking group to do with my father's office, solicitor's office, hill walking group. So we went every month to some mountain in the Highlands. You could get to Perthshire or the mountains around there
Yes.
in an hour and a half.
Yes, that's right.
So we did, I don't know, I've done most of the Munros that are within easy access of Edinburgh.
Have you?
The mountain's over 3,000 feet.
And do you have a favourite?
Do I have a favourite? Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I've done Ben Law's more than any other, but
Put you on the spot there.
yes, you have. You have. I mean, my I have this tradition that every significant birthday, I have to go up a mountain because
Okay.
it's so important to me.
All right.
So
Isn't that every birthday, as far as I'm concerned? Every birthday
well,
is significant.
It's every birthday it's good, but every birthday with a kind of round number every
Okay.
decade
Yes, is
is
extremely important.
Yes. So my last significant birthday,
Yes.
I actually went up a mountain which isn't a Munro, but was a long-held ambition to go up. So it is one of my favourite mountains just because it's so dramatic, even
Yes.
though it's not a Munro or even a Corbett.
Okay, what's a Corbett?
A mountain between 2,500 and 3,000 feet.
Wow, okay.
So actually it's
Very
pretty
specific.
low, I mean, you know, in the European scale of things.
Yes, yes.
But it's called Sullivan.
Mm-hmm.
It's way up in Sutherland, kind of close to Lochinver is the closest
Okay.
little town. And it rises like some sort of prehistoric beast out of the moorland. I mean, completely bizarre rock formation, really, really sheer.
Yes.
So it's so exciting to see. And to get there, it's very remote, so you have to walk for 4 hours over midge-infested bog to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, yes.
And it's very swampy underfoot and so on. And then you start ascending this really sheer mountain
Yes.
for about an hour or something.
Wow.
And you get to this kind of, it's like a kind of dinosaur humpback shape.
Yes.
And from the top you can see the whole coastline of the northwest.
Oh, wow.
It's very beautiful.
I don't think I've ever actually been to Sutherland, which is, I must get there.
It's really, it's very dramatic.
Yes.
It's so kind of, it's very wild.
And I suppose
basically.
it is infested because you can only climb it in kind of
In the summer.
Spring, summer
Yes, I mean ideally you would do it in May before the midges come out. But
Yes.
the problem is my birthday's at the end of August,
months.
so it's peak mid-season.
Mid-season, yes. Yeah, and of course it would defeat the purpose if you went before. Or
No, exactly.
Indeed.
In
Actually-
fact, I think on the last birthday we did it on the 29th because we wanted to make sure we got it in. So,
And the mid-season, when does it end? Is it October?
I think it's starting to die down by September.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, we did
In
Torridon.
theory.
We were in Torridon 2 years ago in September, and on bad, kind of rainy days or very still days, it was very midgy. But
Yeah.
then we did a fantastic climb of Ben Alligan, which is another favourite mountain, absolutely stunning. Again, sheer up, but that is a Munro. You get 2 Munros actually
Okay.
in the climb.
In the climb.
And like all the mountains in the northwest, you start more or less from sea level.
Okay.
So you do your full 3,000 feet of ascent,
yes.
and they're all really sheer up.
Right.
Which makes them hard, but also very dramatic.
Yes, yeah, a real sense of achievement when you get to the top as well.
Yes.
And are there trails, or are you literally walking through scrub? And do you need a map?
You definitely need a map, yes, because the weather changes so much, so rapidly there, that you could easily, the cloud will bubble up out of nowhere.
Yeah, yes.
And so you need a map to know.
Or GPS, I suppose.
Well, now, yes, I guess.
Yes.
But,
so here we are at the top of Parliament Hill. It's a bit of a cloudy, hazy day, but we have a good view of the Shard rising out of the London skyscape there.
Yes.
And there's so many new buildings that I just don't recognise. I can see the
walkie-talkie and the very ugly square block, modern. But
and I think we came up here one very wet, boggy, where it was very muddy walking up here for the fireworks at New Year one year. Because you did get, apart from the trees, you've got to choose your place well, because otherwise you don't see the fireworks for the trees. But this year there aren't going to be any fireworks, so I learnt.
Oh really?
They're not doing the fireworks this year. Yeah.
Yes. Now we often come to just below the trees. We come up the hill and you can actually get a pretty good view from below the trees.
Yeah, that makes sense.
At the horizon without all the crowds.
Yes, but still a real sense of festivity and a lot of people in good mood up here.
Yes.
So from here, the top of Parliament Hill, we're going to walk.
Yeah, so we're looking over towards Highgate there with
oh, that's right. Highgate.
Marks buried there.
Highgate Cemetery. And in fact, when I came out at Hampstead Heath Station, I didn't realise that Keats lived here.
Yes.
So no wonder you live in this area, Jennifer.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So your life took you.
Do you want to head over this way?
Yeah. Your life took you to from Edinburgh to Cambridge University to study
classics originally, and then I changed to English literature for the second half of my degree, and I did my PhD on Shelley and Romantic Hellenism, so Shelley in Greece.
Yes.
And also the other Romantics, Keats and Byron.
Yes.
So yes, I like all that era of English literature. The idealism of the poets who thought that poetry could change the world and who reinvested the natural landscape with a kind of spiritual sense, and were caught up with the ideas of the French Revolution, and then they all died young before they could get cynical.
Has that actually led you or encouraged you to write poetry yourself?
No, I did. I used to write poetry when I was a teenager, and in fact, I actually thought I started double bass lessons when I was 16 or 17, and I had to pay for the lessons myself, and I had this great idea that I could earn the money for the lessons by selling my poems to the Scotsman newspaper.
Yes.
So I sent them off very enthusiastically, and of course nothing happened.
Oh dear.
I was so naive. And so I ended up doing a newspaper round instead.
Right.
Delivering the newspapers, not publishing them. But yes, so now I just analyse poetry, as part of my job.
Yes.
And write non-fiction and fiction instead, rather than poetry.
So after completing your PhD, you were offered a post, or had you already been offered a post at Cambridge while you were doing your PhD?
I got, just towards the end of it, I got a junior research fellowship, which is like a postdoc position for 3 years. And so with that kind of in place, I went off to Greece for 2 months with Byron's letters printed out in my rucksack, and we tried to follow Byron's footsteps through Greece.
Yes.
We were partly following the footsteps of Byron, particularly through Epirus, which is northwest Greece, up towards the Albanian border.
Yes.
Walking through the Pindus Mountains, where Byron had walked with, at that point, the only maps you could get of Greece, because they were very kind of careful about security. So they didn't have ordnance survey maps that you could buy in shops easily.
Yes.
You had to go to a special office in Athens and get a massive map that was about that size on like a metre long.
A metre long, yes.
On a big piece of sort of hardened paper.
Yes.
And we rolled it up and had it on the back of our rucksacks like a sort of medieval scroll. And,
that you'd unroll when you felt you were not sure you were going in the right direction.
Exactly. And the main danger were the sheepdogs, which were really fierce.
Yes,
and
they still are in Greece. Yes.
Yeah, bred to keep off mountain lions or something.
Yeah.
And you had to go around walking with a stick to kind of fend off the dogs.
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm very scared of dogs, so. Then we also climbed Mount Taigatos, which is the highest mountain in the Peloponnese.
Okay.
Which took about 3 days, because this was July, August, so midges weren't the problem, but the heat was the problem.
Yes.
So you could only walk for about 3 hours in the early morning, and then 3 hours in the kind of late afternoon, and then find a shady tree or something to hide out in the rest of the day.
So in the Peloponnese, it's a number of kind of fingers as well, isn't it?
Yes.
So
that was the other thing we did, was to follow also the footsteps of Patrick Leigh Fermor.
I wondered whether
and he wrote this really great book called The Marni, which is the middle prong of the Peloponnese.
I used to sell it in the shop, in fact. I sold quite a few copies of that. Yeah.
So so we walked all around there.
Yes.
Sleeping on beaches,
little
caves or coves.
It's beautiful, that area. I love it.
It's
just very the colours as well of the very dramatic, almost in the summer, a very harsh, dry landscape, and then the blue sky and the sunsets were incredible.
Yes.
And
the sea was beautiful.
And the end of this great walking tour that you did, what was the aim? To write something?
The aim was to, in a way, get a sense of the landscapes that had inspired these writers, and maybe we were sort of interested in the borders, so all the coastlines, the borders of northern Greece, the bits going towards Albania, or we actually went to the island of Samothraki, which is the closest to Turkey, and climbed the highest mountain on Samothraki.
Oh, well done.
Also from sea level,
well
because
done.
we were camping on the beach.
Yes.
That was getting up in the dark.
Yes.
Walking with torches to start with.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, I didn't have time to do that because I was there with my little car.
Right.
Yes. So I wasn't. I left the car in Alexandroupoli and then took the boat across to Samothraki. I love Samothraki.
It is.
Again, it was so hot though. Literally, you couldn't do anything during the day. It was just impossible.
Yes.
Just from the heat of the sun.
But unlike some of the other islands, there are water sources.
There are
different springs.
That's true.
So it's wooded and places.
So well done for walking to the top there. And of course, there's they are the ancient gods that were in contention with the gods of Olympia, the Samothraki ancient gods.
Yes.
I forget.
Mother goddess.
Yes. So from this adventure, you then began working at Cambridge.
Yes. So becoming more of a professional academic.
Yes. And that role from being a student and having that freedom to explore and research in the way you had done, to suddenly being on the other side of the lectern, shall we say? You're actually giving the lectures rather than listening to the lectures.
Yes.
How
Well, I think I've always, partly if you're an academic, in some ways you are a perpetual student. So I don't think I've ever lost that sense of curiosity.
Yes.
Or the desire to actually not just confine my research to the library, but go to places that are connected with the writing and interview people and make a sort of attention to the world get calibrated with the attention to the text.
Yes, yes.
So yes, the PhD was turned into a book on Shelley and Greece.
Right.
But my next book was on archaeology and the imagination.
Yes.
And for that I realised that I couldn't just read about archaeology and sort of in theory. I actually had to get my hands dirty, and so I went on some archaeological digs.
That's right, you went to Belize, did you?
Yes.
That's right.
I had this great idea of myself as a sort of Indiana Jones.
And what was the reality of
The
that?
reality was much more prosaic. Yes, I wasn't kind of discovering a new temple hacking through the jungle with my machete. We were in a field excavating this domestic site
Yes.
called Baking Pot. And yes, in the course of the week I uncovered the corner of a house foundation.
Oh,
I
well
think.
done. Okay, so you felt you've achieved something.
But because they knew I was writing a book, I was allowed to leave Baking Pot one day and go and see this cave which the chief archaeologist had explored the year before.
Yes.
Which had just been featured in National Geographic, which they thought, well, the thinking is that it was the Mayan entrance to the Underworld, or one of the Mayan entrances to the Underworld. So we actually had to, it was very Indiana Jones stuff, we had to walk through the jungle to get there.
Yes.
With a Mayan guide who had his machete and led the way, and we passed this fer-de-lance snake curled up on the path getting there, and he held it down with the neck down with his machete so I could look at it, and then he cut its head off.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Otherwise, it probably.
It was one of the 10 deadliest snakes.
Okay. What's it called? A
fer-de-lance.
Fer-de-lance. Okay.
And then we got to the entrance of the cave where there's a river. There's a river kind of running through it.
Yes.
And we had to swim into the cave, fully clothed, with our climbing boots on and everything, and hard hats with lights on so we could see. And you kind of swam into this cave for about, I don't know, 30 minutes or more, and then kind of clambering over rocks with water, and then finally got to a kind of place where you could climb out of the river onto a kind of natural shelf, and then we took our boots off because it was so delicate in terms of the archaeology.
Yes.
And you were just kind of padding through in your socks with starting to see pots, and unlike a normal excavation where the pots are all in pieces,
yes,
because they'd been in this cave forever, they were intact from 800 AD or
they were
whenever
preserved
it was.
within that a climate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, we came to this whole skeleton that was probably a sacrifice.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
My goodness, what an experience! And do you know what's happened to that site since? Has it?
Well,
been,
I think they can't. It's too delicate to make it available to the public. So.
No.
But,
what an experience! Wow.
Yes.
So did that play a part in
that
the
came
book?
into the book, a little bit in the book.
And I know we went on a bit of an adventure to Turkey as well for that book, didn't we? Troy.
Yes. So one of the chapters was on Troy, the whole history of Schliemann, digging it up. But even prior to that, the debate about where Troy was. Because if you remember, there's now the place where all the archaeology is focused, which is Hisarlik, which is Schliemann's site. But in the 18th century, they thought that the Troy was somewhere else, Bunarbashi. Mm-hmm. And we actually went to the village, do you remember, where
that's right.
the local people were very keen to show us their little kind of tumulus that was Bunarbashi.
Yes. All I remember, Jennifer, is that wherever we went, Byron seemed to be with us. I remember standing on a mound, and you were convinced. You said that this had something to do with Byron.
Absolutely, yes. So that is now known as Achilles Tomb. It's this huge kind of tumulus.
Yes.
And that was always thought to have been Achilles' tomb. It's on the plain of Troy, so it's down on the plain below Hisarlik.
Yes.
And it was always thought to have been Achilles' tomb right back to Alexander the Great's time. Because when Alexander was there, the Trojan War was already over 1,000 years in the past.
Yes.
So already myths and legends had accrued around the whole place.
Yes.
And he visited this tomb and sacrificed there before he continued his campaign across Asia Minor, thinking he was, propitiating the ghost of Achilles.
Yes. Okay.
And in the 18th century, people continued to think it was Achilles. And actually, in 1790, they actually supposedly excavated it under the French authorities, and said that they'd found, this urn with the ashes of Achilles, but nobody could produce the actual evidence. They only had a copy of it, which immediately kind of the British, because of the British-French conflict at the time, the British immediately poured scorn on the French idea that this was the bones of Achilles.
Right.
And so Byron went to visit it in 1811, and wrote in his diary that he used to think that if he went there, that he would be visiting the bones of Achilles. But now, because of the British scepticism of the French excavation, potentially that mound was empty instead of pregnant with the historical past, as it were. So I wanted to see it. But if you remember the chief archaeologist, he was sceptical about it because there's no kind of archaeological, factual thing there. But to me, the important thing was the stories that have been told about it over the years. Over the centuries, the millennia. So he eventually agreed to let one of his students, who was called Seamus, I don't know if you remember.
Oh, that's right.
Which I thought was very interesting, because Seamus Heaney's opening poem in one of his best collections is called Digging. So this idea that this Turkish student called Seamus would show us a mound which people had dug was just too good to be true. But anyway, we went there to see it, because it was the place of that Byron had visited, and there's so many people in the past had visited and was so important.
Yes. Oh well, there we go. I had actually forgotten. All I could remember was the mound and Byron, and you go. I think I kind of lost track of.
I mean, one of the things with archaeology is the gulf between the stories and so on, and the kind of prosaic reality of all you see in front of you.
Which is what your book is all about, isn't it? The digging the dirt.
Exactly.
And our reality was being completely eaten alive by mosquitoes. Do you remember where we were?
Yes, well, we were sleeping out because it was too hot in the hotel, so we slept out on the balcony.
Yes, it was like a kind of a
and
motel
we got woken
lodge,
by the muezzin at 5 a.m. But then we started having to get up even before the muezzin had done his first call's prayer.
So we had to go to the archaeology site for
6 a.m. breakfast or something.
Early, well, because it was so hot,
earlier.
they would have to do their work before 10 almost, didn't they?
Yes. No, because I also went on a dig in Israel as part of that research for that book.
Mm-hmm.
And there we used to, we would get up at 5:20 and start work at 6, and then stop for breakfast at 8:30.
Right.
And then work for another 2 hours and then have a watermelon break, and then we were finished by 1.
Yes.
Which when the day got to its hottest.
Yeah. Yes.
And then there'd be a siesta, and then you'd wash pottery at 4, which was always my favourite time of the day, because I'd have a cup of tea and I'd just have my hands in some nice cold water,
keeping cool,
and chat to people while I kind of lazily rubbed a bit of shard of pottery.
From this book, Digging the Dirt, where did the inspiration or the idea come to write about digging up Milton? Because this is a very interesting story, which is sort of based on fact and fiction all mingled together.
Exactly.
And set in London as well.
Exactly. Yes. Well, I came across a story actually when I was doing research for the archaeology book. One of the chapters in the archaeology book, the Digging the Dirt book, is on digging up bodies. And so as part of that, I came across this pamphlet in the British Library telling the story of the disinterment of Milton's tomb in 1790.
Milton being a poet as
Milton
well,
being the poet, author of Paradise Lost, who had died over 100 years previously.
Yes.
But people in this church had known that he was supposed to have been buried there, and when the church was undergoing some renovation, they took the opportunity to kind of search out for his coffin. And then, according to the pamphlet, there's a number of them went back and kind of couldn't resist the curiosity of looking inside, and then actually started kind of ransacking the body for relics or souvenirs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually when the pamphlet, which is only about 20 pages long, that's when the pamphlet came to an end, with the story kind of half told. And I was really curious about what happened next,
Yeah.
what happened to the bits afterwards. And anyway, who were these people who had done this, and what was their motivation?
Yes, yeah.
And so it became a novel, which is told in 12 chapters, mirroring the 12 books of Paradise Lost.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like a deconstruction of Milton,
Yeah.
metaphorically and literally, and all told from the perspective of one of the people who was involved in the selling of relics.
And was this somebody that a character that you imagined, or was it based on
It's
the
actually
fact
based
of
on a couple of lines in the pamphlet. This woman
Okay.
is mentioned guarding the church
Yeah.
after the body had been disinterred.
Yes.
But yes, the rest of it is my imagination.
Yes.
So
And
she
how
gets
hard
fleshed
was
out as a character, as someone who can't read or write, but is very good with maths and physics and a great business sense.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. And did you base the character on someone you knew, or an imagination,
No,
or from
she-
another book, or
It was my imagination, really. I mean, it's told in her voice from 1790, so I read and I teach novels from the 18th century, and so certain novels like Moll Flanders by Daniel Defoe,
yes.
or Fanny Hill by John Cleland, these are first-person narratives by female characters, so
Yeah.
they kind of influenced me.
Okay. So you had a baseline almost to go from,
Yes.
on which to base a character.
Yeah, but I think with writing fiction, you have to get a sense of the voice. Once you have the voice in your head, then it starts to sort of write itself.
Yeah. So this brings me on. There's two worlds of Cambridge, isn't there? Because there's the University of Cambridge, and then there's the various houses. Is it
Colleges.
Colleges, sorry. Yeah, the various colleges, like Peterhouse, which is the house that you're attached to.
That's right.
So you're employed by Peterhouse College.
Primarily, yes.
Yes, rather than by the university.
That's right.
And I
yes.
find this a really fascinating. There's almost two tiers to how the university operates.
Yes.
Is that a historical thing? That historically it was the colleges that employed.
Well, the colleges are the oldest. The oldest aspect of the university. I don't actually know.
Okay, but
Which is
Peterhouse.
kind of odd.
but-
Peterhouse is the oldest college.
Yes, and it was the last college to actually admit women as well. Is that
Second
right?
class.
Second last. Okay.
Yes, but yes, it was founded in 1284,
Mm-hmm.
and it started admitting women in 1986.
Okay, so it's very recent,
It
really,
is,
isn't it?
It is, yes. And
I mean-
there aren't many of us on the the faculty side
Yeah,
even
yeah.
now.
Yes, because I would call myself quite privileged in the end getting a bursary to do my masters, and I was at Peterhouse as well. But that was
Yes.
in 90, yikes,
Late 90s.
96, was it? 97,
Something
97,
like that.
98. So still actually
Yes.
relatively, and I didn't appreciate that, it was relatively new to now. Obviously there's more and more women.
There are
At
at the
Peterhouse.
undergraduate, graduate level, but
Yeah.
still in the faculty level, it's very few.
Yeah, and in terms of English as a degree, is that still a very popular degree to do, or how are you promoting it as a degree to do?
Yes. I
Or
think
to
it
study, I
is.
should say.
I don't think that the humanities are so much under attack in Cambridge as other universities worldwide.
Mm.
And still, people are very keen to study us at school.
Yes, yeah.
So we still have a large number of applicants.
Okay, coming through.
And yes, and people go on from studying English to go into the theatre or publishing, or a lot of people change to law, so they've done an interesting degree to start with, and then they get vocational afterwards.
Yes.
So there's a whole range of things people do.
Yeah.
A kind of rich seam of comedians coming out of Cambridge as well. So a couple of my students have become quite well-known comedians.
Have they?
Or comic writers.
Okay. Are we allowed to know who they were?
Well, John Finnemore.
Okay. Yes.
Freddie Cyborn.
I will have to follow. But that's great to see that also that comedy lives on, as it were.
Yes.
Especially in
which is
times
kind of
like
funny
this.
because my main specialty now is tragedy.
I was going to say, and how did that come about?
Well, I've always taught the compulsory course in tragedy for third years at Cambridge because it incorporates both Shakespeare but also Greek tragedy. And as I started as a classicist, and my research is on classics and English together, it made sense to teach that paper, and I'm interested in Greek tragedy. But because I'm always interested in how literature relates to the world, and as I said, I'm not content to just stay in the library, tragedy seems to be the literary form which is most interested in how it relates to world events or terrible experiences, sorrows, catastrophes in the world. So it has a kind of ethical side to it, which I've always responded to. So so that's my latest, the latest 2 books I've published.
Right.
3 books I published.
And in fact...
So the latest... I published the Cambridge Introduction to Tragedy in 2007, but then 2019 I published the Tragedy Since 9/11, Reading a World Out of Joint, which is basically on the events of the last 20 years read through the kind of lens of traditional tragedy. So 9/11 and lament, the Iraq War and revenge tragedy, and finishing up with the final chapter on climate change and tragic time. And can you have non-human tragedy? Is it tragic if we lose all the coral reefs, or there are no Tasmanian frogs left? That kind of thing.
Yes. And has it sparked debate, your book, putting that out there, or have you been able to take it chapter by chapter and almost have a debate on each? Yeah,
I've published articles, sort of spin-off articles about climate change, for example, or I gave a talk on the refugee crisis and tragedy. But I now realise that there's a missing final chapter.
Oh.
In that, it was published in 2019 and March 2020.
Of course,
we all went into COVID lockdown. So I'm actually, that's one of the things I'm doing at the moment, is preparing to write the sequel, as it were, the next chapter on plague and tragedy.
Oh, wow.
And the ways in which we mourn.
Yes.
And how that's been disrupted by COVID. I mean, precisely what you can't do under COVID. So.
And when is that due to come out?
Well, I have to give a big lecture on it in Tbilisi, Georgia next July. So that's the kind of goal, and then I'll publish it afterwards. Okay.
Well, good luck with that. Do you get depressed by when you're actually not research? Well, I suppose researching and writing about it. Does it pull you? How do you manage to stay positive? Stay cheerful.
Yes, it's a good question. Somehow it makes me feel less depressed actually confronting it than ducking away from it.
Okay.
I get really depressed when people kind of get escapist and try not to talk about things.
Yes, yeah.
There's a route we could do that is slightly more rural, down over the bridge
yes,
there, and I don't
that.
think it's too muddy.
Okay.
Otherwise, this is the M1.
The M1 to Kenwood House. Let's go the more rural, scenic route, shall we?
This is Robert's favourite frisbee field.
Oh, is it?
The one that he snuck into.
So actually, that nicely leads us on to the work that you have been doing with Robert, your husband, through the years as a He's a photojournalist by trade.
Yes.
And through your collaborations with you writing and he taking photographs, you've gone to a number of very interesting countries. But the one that really stands out for me is your trip and the project in India.
Yes.
And if you'd like to talk a little bit about that, let our podcast listeners know of that story.
Yes. Well, we've been to this area of India twice now to research this investigation into the tribal cultures, Adivasi cultures in this area, Jharkhand, which is west of Calcutta, northeast India.
Yes.
Which is traditionally an area where there are a lot of pre-Hindu tribal peoples with their animist culture. But like many indigenous peoples around the world, they suffer what's known as the resource curse, in that the land on which they've lived for millennia is full of all the minerals that India now wants for its development. So it's where all the coal deposits, huge amount of coal, iron ore, uranium, various other things are there concentrated in that land.
Yes.
And now international companies, but also within India, Tata Steel, for example, moving in there and mining or industrializing, and the indigenous people don't have any paper documentation to their land because they haven't needed it for millennia, and they just get displaced from their land, and the old customs, the old traditions, and the villages and so on are being eradicated. And so we went there in 2005-06 and then again in 2010 to visit different villages and areas of this state and talk to people and photograph them, from all perspectives.
Yes. And then
it resulted in a big exhibition.
Yes, at the SOAS.
Yes. Exactly.
Which was which was a huge success, I think. Well, and just a huge success in the sense that of bringing a greater awareness to what's happening in parts of the world that otherwise we would not have any idea about. And although as individuals we may not be able to do anything, it's a collective understanding and knowledge helps to spread the word of how careful we have to be and be more aware of also what's going on in our world as well.
Well, yes. I mean, actually, we're all interconnected, because a lot of the companies that are industrializing in this way in India are registered on the London Stock Exchange. Mm-hmm. So, yes, actually, there is a way in which people in the West can do something about that. In terms of their investments.
And
but also, yes, various pressures. There are charities and NGOs that are working there, but
and pressure groups as well.
Yes. So as part of the exhibition, we also involved the artwork of tribal women artists from Hazaribagh in the north of Jharkhand.
Yes.
And they were their artwork was interspersed amongst the photographs. Right. And at the opening, we brought some of the artists over for the opening.
That's right, yes.
And art has almost become a form of activism there, as well as, the work is being done to preserve it. I still keep in touch with the activists that we worked with there.
Yes.
And they're starting to commercialise the artwork in ways which I think is very interesting. So they're making kind of wallpaper or curtains or that kind of thing to bring money to the community, but also to make the art better known in Delhi or whatever, which is all helpful as well, I think.
And in terms of the communities that have been displaced, is this all helping to protect them in some ways, or what is happening to those communities? I suppose it's 10 years since you were last there.
10 years since I was last there, yes. We've just had COP26, in which India changed the wording at the final hour and agreed only to phase down coal rather than phase out coal. And having seen coal mines in Jharkhand from both the huge ones that were funded by the World Bank to the tiny illegal artisanal mines,
Yes.
which are hugely dangerous for the people who work in them.
Yeah.
People go down in flip-flops with a pickaxe.
My goodness. Yeah.
And the villagers then rely on tiny scraps of coal that they pick off the slag heaps as their one source of energy for cooking and heating and so on, because all the trees which they traditionally use for firewood have been cut down, because all their woods have been eradicated to make way for the mine. So all they now live as scavengers around the edge of the mine, which is taking place where their village once stood and where their goats grazed and so on.
Yeah.
So you can understand that actually, the poorest people are now dependent on the sort of residue of coal that gets tossed out on the slag heaps.
Yes.
So I'm not sure that it's going to be phased out anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be. I mean, with the other, in between this work on Jharkhand, we actually also went a separate year to Rajasthan to visit the Barefoot College set up by Bunker Roy, which actually empowers villagers.
Is this the right way again?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And there they, for example, train Dalit women to make and repair solar lanterns and solar cookers.
Okay.
And then they use these solar lanterns to be able to teach rural girls at night schools, because they can't go to school during the day because they have to go and look after the animals. So a lot of the girls were getting uneducated.
Yes,
but then they go to the night schools after their day's work, so it's really tough, but lit by these solar lanterns. And so the Barefoot College was such a example of hope and what you could do with solar energy, which of course India has a lot of.
Yes.
And also decentralised, because it's the most powerless in the normal social hierarchy of people in the community, the Dalit women, who are then given the power to lead this technological revolution. So if they could do that in Jharkhand and decentralise everything, instead of it all, the coal mines shipping the coal to power stations that light up Delhi, don't light up the local villages, then life would be very different.
Yes. But these small steps are, I hope, empowering other small communities into realising what they can do also to, locally.
Well, actually, I mean, so the Barefoot College movement is being exported worldwide. So when we were there, we met people who'd come in from Bolivia to be trained at this place.
Oh, wow.
And they've also trained people in Kenya, I think.
Right.
It's being...
Fantastic. I shall look them up, because I hadn't heard of them as a movement.
But it's just whether it can work in industrial areas which have the resource curse of having the minerals. I mean, the Rajasthan works because it's a desert, so there's nothing anyone wants there. They can allow these villages to.
Bit boggy around here. Hang on, I'll take a bit of a body swerve around here. So we're walking across the meadow, I suppose, meadowland, or the green acreage in front of Kenwood House, which is
this is
an
supposed to be a landscape garden by capable ground.
I'm sure there's meant to be a ha-ha somewhere.
Yes. But
the ha-ha is the fact that it's a bit... Where has it gone? And also, in my heady days of living in Haringey, many decades ago, when I first was in London, this is where it used to come up to this part, because in the summer they used to have the summer concerts, so you just come up with a picnic.
Yes.
And those, I think, initially, it was actually a free thing, or it was very, very
you could
cheap.
Just put your picnic the other side of the fence.
Exactly, put your picnic rug out and bring your food, and the music was amazing. Look at the colours there over there, and all those orange leaves and russet-coloured leaves all just dropped in front of the tree. So, as well as India, you've been to Greece and to Japan, and in fact, I think I met you and Robert in Croatia too, on an island doing a collaboration there. But from these trips that you've done to various places around the world, has it? Obviously, it's very exciting. But do you get so involved in the story, you don't actually get a chance to enjoy where you are, or are you able to be able to compartment the working side and then the enjoyment side?
Yes, I mean, the Jharkhand story wasn't exactly enjoyable.
No.
Because it's quite harrowing. Some parts of it, you see the conditions in which people live. And I remember one point we went to this village to interview a mother whose Adivasi teenage boy had been beaten to death in the police cells the night before.
Oh my goodness.
And I had to interview her in front of the whole village.
Crikey.
And I couldn't, because I'm not a hardened journalist, I couldn't do it without crying.
No.
But yes, there was parts of the story we did in Rajasthan where the kind of commitment of the people from Barefoot College and the women who were, learning from them and doing rainwater harvesting or whatever it was so moving that you were kind of in tears from just the sort of the humanity of it all. So,
Yes, yes.
But yeah, on the whole, I would say that when you go to a place and you've got a kind of mission like this, and you have interviews, so you're talking to people from all sort of points of the spectrum.
Yes.
So you're going not as a tourist, but you're becoming an insider. You're getting inside the story, talking to all these people. I think you get so much more out of it than if you just go as a tourist.
Definitely, yeah.
And there's a sort of point to you being there.
Yes, yes.
So I think we, on the whole, I mean, just occasionally, because I would do a lot of these stories with Robert, my husband,
Yeah.
who's taking photos, and he always seems to be taking photos when it's sunset, and that's when very occasionally I'd like to sit in a cafe with him, drink a cocktail in the sunset, and just live instead of see the world through a camera lens. I sometimes feel I'm, a camera widow or whatever. But
for his Condé Nast moments.
Yes, exactly.
So we've arrived at Kenwood House, which actually I haven't been inside for many years, but this is English heritage property.
Yes, so all this Kenwood estate is not part of Hampstead Heath. It's not covered by the 1871 Hampstead Heath Act.
Right.
It's a separate organisation. And this was owned by Lord Mansfield, set up by the Mansfield estate, whose main claim to fame was that he was the person who made this very important judgment in the 18th century, which paved the way to the ending of slavery in Britain.
Oh right, I didn't know that.
So although his wealth came partly from his plantations in the West Indies that had slaves, so he himself is a very ambiguous, complex character. That was a great, important achievement on his part.
And we're just coming up to they're raking the leaves off the pathway, and here we are. We've got this a huge cafe, so we should stop and have a nice cup of tea. I think
that would be good. Yeah.
Before we stop here talking about writings and everything, do you have a favourite place that you like to go and write?
Well, I used to. I don't know whether I should do product placement or whatever. I used to go to Costa Coffee in Belsize Park a lot and sit there for hours and write.
Yes.
And I've been missing that with lockdown. Going out, I mean, I've just been writing at home, and that felt very different.
Yes, because your time is very much split between London and Cambridge. So, and with all the lovely, wonderful libraries in Cambridge, I take it, do you need to differentiate your professional life as a lecturer and a doctor of English and doctor of English?
Yes,
literature, and then your professional life as an author?
I think I do, yes. Yeah. I think it's really that living in London gives me that distance and another reality. Mm-hmm. And I tend to think of Cambridge as just where I work, for teaching and so on. And then London, I come back and I write.
Yes.
And I used to go to the British Library a lot, of course.
Yes, which is a beautiful space nice calm space to go and write. Yes. In fact, I've got my copy of Driving Tito, which I have to take to the British Library. Oh. I've been sent numerous letters saying, why haven't you brought it? Because apparently you have to...
you take your book?
Take your book. If you've
right.
got an ISBN, you've got to submit it.
Right.
Yes. So,
I've never done that.
So I was going to do that after.
I thought
later
that
on.
they it was their job to acquire it, not your job to
Well, that would be
donate
nice.
it.
That would be nice. Maybe they'll buy it from me when I get there.
Or you need somebody to request it,
Yes.
and then they would buy it.
Yes. And where in London do you go for peace and quiet then?
Well, I guess Hampstead Heath.
Yes. On your
I mean,
doorstep.
although this isn't peace and quiet, my favourite London walk
Yeah.
used to be from Embankment Tube Station to the National Theatre,
Okay.
which isn't very long, I know.
Which way would you go?
Over the
From
Golden
Embankment?
Jubilee Bridge.
Oh, to the National
To
Theatre, of
the
course.
National Theatre.
Of
I mean, in other
course.
words, crossing the river.
Yeah, yes. Okay.
Looking
The
at that
old
view up the river.
Hungerford Bridge.
Exactly. Yeah.
It probably is still the Hungerford Bridge for the trains, but it's
Yeah.
the Jubilee Bridge for
But
the.
just crossing the river and seeing the skyline, and then with the anticipation of the National Theatre at the end.
Well, it doesn't have to be about length of or distance when you go somewhere.
No.
It's actually what you see. Yeah, and you see so many different skylines there as well, don't you?
Yes.
Your sunsets and when it's windy, it's quite a it's a long walk when it's a windy day.
That's
isn't
true.
it?
That's true.
Battling against it. Okay,
Yes.
so let's go and stop and have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Yeah, one final question for podcast listeners. Where can they find out more about you? You've got your website, Jennifer Wallace Author. .co.uk, and that's
Yes.
Wallace Wallace.
That's right, yes.
And
it's a
Jennifer-
little bit moribund though. Don't keep it up
You don't keep it up.
very religiously.
But you're
I have
also-
a Facebook page and also a Twitter.
Okay, and what are those? Is that Jennifer Wallace?
JMB Wallace 1.
Okay.
That's my Twitter.
Okay, I'll put those in the show notes so anybody who wants to check out what you're up to and anything that's more recent, they can do that there. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for talking to me today, and now we can get on and have a cup of tea and a piece of cake. And to all you podcast listeners out there, I hope you've enjoyed our chat today as we've walked across the acres of Hampstead Heath and ended up at Kenwood House. If you've enjoyed the show, please share it with your friends. Do subscribe to the Travelling Through podcast. There'll be another one coming out next week. But for now, take care and thanks for listening.